All right, the B.L.A.D E game. Is it going to be an Xbox exclusive? The simple answer to that is more than likely yes. I've seen a lot of people kind of present the possibility that this is not going to be the case. But to those people, I want to say yes, there is the likelihood that this game is multi-plat. And I'm saying it because there's nothing set in stone. Microsoft's Xbox has not announced where it's going to be, but looking at the way the market has actually progressed in the last few months, or I would say in the last few years, it seems like Xbox is using games like these to actually leverage conversations around gaming, around exclusivity, and even trying to see how Microsoft, their new strategy is going to push Sony to respond before then they make their next move. This whole console competition or gaming competition between Xbox and PlayStation has now entered the level of chess mode. You see, many of the people on all sides of the divide were not paying a lot of attention. For the last few years, I've been saying it, that this console generation, that Xbox was not going to go out without a fight. A lot of people thought I was crazy. They said, oh, you're just being an Xbox fanboy, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that happens is when you remain too comfortable in your own little bubble, what happens is you don't pay attention to what may be brewing around the corner. I don't even think Sony was paying attention to what was brewing around the corner, and they decided to go very aggressive with a strategy that they had leaned on and depended on for way too long. And what was that strategy? It was a very simple strategy. They decided that they were going to leverage third-party exclusives and pad their own ecosystem with them, and then make it seem like, oh, PlayStation was the best place to actually play games, when in reality, they weren't doing a lot of the heavy hitting and a lot of the work. They were making money from games like Call of Duty, Fortnite, EA's FIFA, and using a lot of that money to pretty much leverage all of the third-party developers to bring their games to their platforms, and then selling more consoles in the event of that. So kind of this cyclical strategy that was kind of growing their console and hardware ecosystem. I mean, the PlayStation 4 sold over 100 million units. So this was a very successful strategy. However, like every strategy, there are weaknesses to it. And that weakness was that at some point, their competitor who had more money or had access to more money than them was going to find a way to subvert that, or at least the pressure of the market would have required from, Xbox to either find a way to subvert it or leave the market. And it seemed like Xbox was not ready. So Xbox went in and acquired Bethesda, even while a game like Deathloop was a timed exclusive on the PlayStation platform. Some of you may or may not remember that, but if you do not remember that, I recommend that you go look at the history, because Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo were Bethesda games that were timed exclusive to the PlayStation platform, and in that period, Microsoft acquired Bethesda right from under their noses. So a lot of those agreements, Phil Spencer decided that those agreements were going to stand. He didn't want to cause any PR issues, but at the end of the day, it was very evident that Sony had no shame in their PlayStation acquisition of these third-party exclusives. They get a third-party exclusive wherever they can find one, and they had continued to do it. In fact, it even came out, and we don't know how conclusive this is, that they were paying money to developers, or at least making their terms a little more stringent when developers tried to go into the Game Pass ecosystem. So all of this has now culminated to this place where Xbox is ready to invest. They've spent $7 billion on Bethesda. They've spent $69 billion on Activision. And now PlayStation fans, whom no longer see a way that Sony can actually depend on Call of Duty money, because now Activision has been acquired and Bethesda has been acquired. And now they see that PlayStation has to now depend on a strategy to actually pump out games from its own ecosystem to make it an attractive platform. Or, in a sense, maybe Xbox's new Game Pass strategy to save players money and give them a lot of value might be the next attractive, paradigm. And so this is now a huge struggle overall, because Phil Spencer's chess game has finally culminated into kind of what I think is a checkmate. Because if you think about it right now, it seems like PlayStation started to recognize that this was not a sustainable model, especially for this generation of consoles. If you think about it, the PC market kind of also showed up during the PS4 era and started to attract a lot of players to it. Didn't matter where they were, whether they were Xbox players or whether they were PlayStation players. Many of them wanted to play their games in better quality that those Xbox One and PS4 consoles were not providing. Many people wanted to step away from the traditional model of paying for PlayStation Plus and enjoying things like Epic Games free games, Ubisoft's free games that they give away during the holidays, and in the case of Epic Games, every week. So there were a lot of market pressures that kind of signaled that the console, progression was eventually going to start to fissure. But it seems like Xbox took the first step to leverage that. And now they have a big Game Pass offering for console players and the entire PC market, and even people with their Teslas and their cell phones. And maybe one day you'll be able to play on your refrigerator while you're in the kitchen waiting for those cookies to come out of the oven. You'll be able to play B.L.A.D.E on your refrigerator. I'm telling many of you this as a joke, but the reality is that's exactly what it is that we're probably progressing to. And it seems like PlayStation is on the back foot of this new movement in regard to gaming. So what is this all about in regard to B.L.A.D.E? How does this all relate to B.L.A.D.E? B.L.A.D.E is a game where we're seeing on Twitter, we're seeing on the internet, people asking this question. I think at the end of the day, this marketing strategy that Xbox actually put out in leaving the announcement ambiguous as to where B.L.A.D.E is going to go is, in my opinion, very brilliant. Because now, as people are asking the question, they're eventually going to start saying to themselves, on the other side of the aisle, and this is the PlayStation and maybe even the Nintendo side, we've enjoyed a lot of these exclusives for the longest time on PlayStation side. It will now make sense for us to actually say Xbox has every right to actually hold exclusives. And if we've expected the people who want to play games on the PlayStation side buy a PlayStation, then it's not out of the question for us to actually expect to go buy an Xbox or get a PC and get Game Pass or get the Xbox app or Steam to be able to play Xbox games. However, there's another side and another layer to this conversation many people are not talking about, and that is the side of the PR. Now, this is very interesting because when you think about the PR, this is something where strategy is a big deal. Also, not saying that this game was going to be exclusive is a very bold and, in my opinion, cool PR move. Because if at any point, Xbox were to say, okay, B.L.A.D.E is going to be a timed exclusive, or B.L.A.D.E is going to be multi-plat, whatever it is, they can read the room and make a decision from there. I don't think they'll go multi-plat year one, though. They might do it as a timed exclusive. Oh, PlayStation is going to get the game when we finally make the PlayStation version later on. Perhaps give them the Square Enix treatment that Sony has leveraged, basically. Sony, people make it seem like Final Fantasy is a PlayStation game, but it's actually a Square Enix. I mean, this. It's published and developed by Square Enix. They just have an arrangement for PlayStation to continue taking money from them, but it appears that strategy is eventually going to fade, seeing that there are just people all over the place who would prefer to play the game and not buy a PlayStation console at this moment. So that's a whole different conversation. So if they went ahead and said, we'll get it as a timed exclusive, you'll probably see that, Xbox coming out as this benevolent publisher with a lot of money and a lot of resources making their games available. But that's another strategy that could be executed if, the market were moving one direction or the other. But I don't know how likely that strategy is going to be. And that's a very small, tiny possibility that is a thing that would happen. So at the end of the day, when you think about it, you have to look at what the market is doing at a given time, or you got to look at what the market is saying at a given time, because these things are going to pretty much, affect and influence the decisions on a high level. That's basically what it's going to be. When you think about these decisions, you got to look and you got to say to yourself, how do these decisions affect and how do they position Xbox? How do they position PlayStation? How does it give PlayStation or how does it give Xbox the upper hand over PlayStation? Because that's the question you have to answer on a fundamental level. If you can answer that question on a fundamental level, you'll be able to make a decision, because if it becomes an exclusive for Xbox, it gives them the upper hand from a value proposition that they've already promised to their customers. If they make it as a timed exclusive, it achieves that same goal and also is able to rake in more sales from the PlayStation platform and gives Xbox a PR boost from those who may be detractors of Xbox, or even places like, regulatory bodies who make it seem like, it seems like, Xbox wants to become this monopoly, even though they don't want to be a monopoly, but still it will give them brownie points over there. So there's a tit for tat, and there's all this really cool stuff that's going on that you really have to pay, attention to and take into consideration. because at the end of the day, this is a much more complex, paradigm than, you would actually think. I mean, there's just a lot to, pay attention to overall. But, these are just my thoughts for now, and I'm making this statement that it is not conclusive to be able to say that this is what it's going to be. And if anything, you have to leave room for changes in the market. You have to leave room for, situations and possibilities. And I think Phil Spencer is making, in my opinion, changes in real time. If you guys think about it, Starfield and the whole Bethesda purchase, he first said, we're going to see games going on other platforms on a case by case basis. Then he decided, no, we're going to go 100% exclusive with Starfield. And even according to the court documents, we're going to be going with every game on Bethesda from Bethesda is now going to be an exclusive because the market demanded that be the case. He saw that, PlayStation's strategy was still going aggressively with games like Final Fantasy and all the others. And so he needed to make a power move, and making that power move resonated around the gaming world. Like, Xbox is confident in their strategy. So they're going to make Starfield an exclusive, and they're going to go ahead and go with it. And I think it really did work out in their favor, because now everybody is aligned and looking carefully like, they did this. They were able to sell a few million copies. I say a few, but it's more like 5 to 6 million copies in sales. And they were able to get about 12 million people to play their game. They exposed their game to 12 million people. And even looking at other third-party people, they're looking and saying, man, a good strategy for us might be to put our games multiplat and get that Game Pass bag at the same time, and then continue to just work on our game and market their game. So again, this is a huge thing that you must consider the business side of things in order to get a very clear picture as the way things may or may not go. But I'll stop here in this video. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching the video, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.